All right, hello and welcome to the Viking Codecast. My name is Erik Trautman. I'm the founder of Viking Code School, which is an online immersive web development program. And with us here today, we have Peter DePaulo, the one and only, a former graduate of the Viking program from years long past when it was but a shadow of its current glory. And Peter is a developer right now with MindBody Online, a public company down in San Luis Obispo. And he's done all sorts of things from design to academia to side projects to mob programming to meteor explorations to JavaScript on top of a C# stack. So we have many questions for how the heck you stitch that resume together, and maybe you do too. And definitely excited to have you back here, Peter. So welcome aboard, and happy to hear what you have to say.
All right, cool. Well, first I'll just do the kind of a classic little introduction. My name's Peter DePaulo. I love JavaScript, which is not a popular stance a lot of the time. So yeah, first of all, just some context for what I do day to day. I'm a front-end engineer, so it's sort of my job to love JavaScript, because if I don't, then the people surrounding me, will just talk shit about it all. Oh, can I cuss on this? Sorry.
Do what you got to do.
Okay.
All right.
We'll
put out the rating of it as PG-13.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. So they'll talk it down quite a lot, and I basically have to make a case for it every day. That being said, it is getting a lot better. So that's what I do. What the stack I work in is TypeScript, actually. So we're already, one step away from raw JavaScript. Half of the stuff we work in is JavaScript, and half is TypeScript. I actually had to ask, because we're a public company, of like what I could share and what I can't. And I thought they were just going to say, go ahead, it's a technical talk, you can talk about whatever you want. And they're like, oh, you can't talk about this, and this. You have to say it this way. You can't say this. Like, okay, fine. So I'm gonna be a little bit vague about certain parts of it, which is frustrating, because I'm working on something really, really cool that I cannot share because it's material non-public information. I was explicitly told not to tell you guys about. But what I can tell you is it's a C# stack. So the backend C#. It's all Microsoft. So that just means Microsoft's flavor of SQL, C#, some ASP in there, which is really rough if you have to work in that. Then going up to what you would expect. It's like the front end, which is the same everywhere. So I spend a lot of time doing a lot of a variety of things. It's more than I thought it was going to be as a front end engineer. I thought it was going to be a lot of sort of implementing designs and like just a lot of kind of basic JavaScript, but the front end has gotten really fat, and so we actually end up needing to do a lot of data manipulation on the front end. That's not just not just for display purposes, which sort of surprised me. And then occasionally I'll have to dip into C#, but very rarely, and it's only topical. I'm not writing any of the logic in C#. So that being said, how did I get here? The very short version is I studied biochemistry and a bit of urban design in college, really eclectic. I went to UCSD. As I was leaving, I became a freelance writer. So I was leaving college. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I thought I was going to be a lawyer, a doctor, an architect. I actually thought that for a second. I pursued each of these really intensely. It wasn't just thoughts. I actually worked for the San Diego Architecture Foundation. I worked at a hospital. I came this close to shadowing a patent attorney. And then I realized most quickly out of all of them, the lawyer was the one that dropped off the quickest. And then at the end of all that, I was like, okay, I'm going to be a writer. I got a job as a remote freelance writer, and I wanted to write about environmental issues. I'm a closet environmentalist. That's what my friend calls me, because I've never made it my full thing, but it's probably one of the most important things to me. So all of my side projects end up touching that.
I think you're out now.
Oh, I'm out. Can you not hear me?
No, I mean you're out of the environmental
Oh
closet.
yeah, I'm out. Yeah, this is live, right? So I'm an environmentalist. Hello. Uh, so I had a ticket to Taiwan at the end of my last year of college. I had a university in Taiwan, in the South Taiwan. I was going to be doing writing basically about environmental science in Taiwan. That was my plan. And my friend said, "Hey, I've got this idea for an app." Um, and I had very little programming experience. It was all like, rudimentary HTML, CSS. I thought I knew some JavaScript, but it was like barely anything. And I did not have any mobile experience whatsoever. So I thought the idea was really cool. We ended up building a bunch of crap. It was called Campulus. It was a really terrible messaging board for college students to be able to post events. Then we found a company that was doing the exact same thing, and they had just gotten a seed round of like almost $2 million, and that was Campus Quad. We contacted them. They said, "How did you get? You don't have anything. How did you get people on this? Like, what? You guys must have something going on." And then they flew us up to Silicon. Well, okay, my friend flew. I drove to Silicon Valley, San Carlos, and then they hired us pretty much out of. And they didn't purchase any of our assets or anything. They just wanted whatever we were doing on their platform. So I did marketing and design for them. And that was extremely frustrating because marketing at a startup, if you don't have product market fit, just means going and trying to find product market fit. So I was really just going to people and like begging them to download the application, try it, watching them use it, and then getting feedback so that we could change the application, which would have been great if we were actually like really lean. But the developers had a kind of a different process, and so when we would put bugs or we would put like things that would be bottlenecks in the user flow on the board, the developers would have stronger arguments in their minds for why they needed to focus on other things first. So we felt the user pains really, really strongly, on the ground. They felt the technical pains at a high level that they were trying to solve. So real problems on both sides, just different. So I realized like I needed, if I was going to be in technology, to actually learn at least what it was all about. And I'm embarrassed to say this, but our stack was Laravel PHP, and someone said, "Why don't you use Ruby on Rails?" It was a Stanford student. So our first client was Stanford. Side note: we went through the Stanford Startup Accelerator. That was a really cool experience. I probably wouldn't have gotten to do if it were for like that startup. So it was a great experience. But side note was, I was super embarrassed to say that when someone said, "Do you know Ruby on Rails? Like, why aren't you guys not using Ruby on Rails?" I thought it was Ruby on Rails, RUBION Rails, and I said that talking to people. I said Ruby on in my head. I never wrote it out, thankfully, like in an email. That would have been so embarrassing. And then I was like, wait, what am I talking about? And I started Googling it, and I couldn't find any results for Ruby on. I was like, what is Ruby on? Someone's like, Ruby's on Rails. So then fast forward a little bit, I left that company for some personal reasons and because I really wanted to just deep dive into this whole learning to program thing. Fast forward again, ended up getting hooked up with Viking Code School and went through it. It's a very different version than it is now, and that was now I think a couple years ago. So I guess I have to fill in the gap between Viking Code School and a job at MindBody. So that very short version is I started another company called Omari, which was super fun, crazy roller coaster. We actually did get clients. We had a cool product. We had a really cool business model. People were really excited about it, and it was basically going super well. And then it crashed. And that was like really my biggest burnt my fingers. I think it was like one of my biggest personal failures. I've experienced. Everything else was pretty good before that, and this was just like really, really good, and then off a cliff and down.
Wait, can you talk about that a little bit more about what you guys were doing, how it came together, your crazy days of driving around?
Yeah. So I think the last Viking Code School related video chat I was on, I was calling from a car on the way to pitch a client, which was a pretty big. So it was software for individual businesses, right? So that we were making. So like each client was it was substantial. I mean, like, and we had a really crazy culture in Omari. I'm still friends with everyone there. A lot of young people, amazing talent, but very raw. I think one of my co-founders was yelling expletives like when I was video chatting with the with Viking Code School. So I'm surprised I was invited back. Yeah. So what we were building, we were working on two things. One was a talent investment platform. So on our side internally, we're building this tool for basically saying, if you guys want to work on something, you're investing your talent into this company, and we don't want to just build these unmaintainable products. We want to build things that like we have some reason to build things that are maintainable. That was kind of like creating a market incentive for maintainability of freelance projects. The problem being solved is, having done freelance in like 3 varying capacities, which is writing, design, and then programming. I realized that quality goes down because it's so easy to just say, okay, I've got a deadline, here's a shortcut, I'm going to take it, and you end up with like inline styles and like just crazy method names and stuff like that. And so I was working with some people, and they were like, oh yeah, this is a really cool idea. It's like, what if we do this talent investment platform and we use this new technology, Meteor? So we were using Meteor. The other thing was basically our first niche to test this business model out was e-commerce sites, e-commerce businesses, anybody who was a small business who wanted to sell online. And we built a rollout platform in Meteor. It was really cool, really technically advanced for some of the stuff we did. And yeah, it was all JavaScript. So I'm pretty deep in the JavaScript game now for a while. It got great responses. We worked on some really fun projects. One was a fried chicken delivery service. A late night fried chicken and waffles delivery service called Kickin' Chicken. One guy we worked with was selling like prints of. We ended up not finishing his project because he dropped out. He's a strange guy, but he was selling like printed calendars and things like that. People were buying them from him, like he would get pictures of kids of people who had kids and make calendars for them. And I was like, how do you have a business? So many people, like there's so many online services for this. And he wanted a digital. Anyways, it ended up not working out either ways. One other guy was a producer for musicians. So you get this idea, wide variety of clients in this one product that was Meteor, rollout, really cool. And then the internal communication platform, and then disbursement. So it's like these pie charts that like, given someone's effort and work on a project, they would have some stake in the project. And then we'd get paid over time instead of just in a lump sum, based on the ability to increase their business, which is at the end of the day what you care about. Programming is business needs. It's all just information. You're addressing business needs. So yeah, that was Omari.
Okay.
We had several clients, and then it ended up not working out because of like a meeting where misinformation was passed, and all of the clients were in like this niche group of people in Santa Cruz, and they all kind of started talking to each other, and we probably could have pulled it out of the wreckage, but it was pretty demoralizing blow for everyone to just have all of these paying clients and then no paying clients, like 5 people paying us on Monday and then $0 coming in on Monday after we worked so hard for 3 months on it.
So from a technical perspective, I mean, you were still relatively fresh with JavaScript, and then you were diving into things at Meteor and working with clients. I mean, like how did that all come together?
That's something that I've learned more about now, is just sort of like, what you don't know and what you do know. I think my strength has always been being like learning whatever I absolutely need to do to get something done. And now I've become more of like an engineer in that I like actually know like why and what I'm doing, and that was definitely a harder thing for me to learn. It's like the discipline side versus the like just purely driven by like caffeine and passion. So yeah, I didn't know as much as I should have for what I was doing. But I got really lucky in that the people involved who were really excited had some very deep technical knowledge. They were the type, like a couple of guys were the type who had been just programming their whole life. Young guys, but they were just really talented. And so we had a good trade of knowledge, and like it ended up being a pretty, I hate to use the word synergy, but it had good synergy for our talents. I ended up being like kind of like more of like a manager for just like a project manager, which really means you're serving the people who are working on things so that they can get them done. And I wrote a lot of the JavaScript myself as well, though, right? Because there were only like 3 or 4 people at the start. But like the deep data side was these guys who were way more technical than me, and then like the interfaces and like I wrote a state machine for like a store that wanted basically, like, it had weird hours, and it wanted to have either a switch that would turn them on or off, but the switch would actually turn it on, so the store would be on some hours and off other hours. So they set the hours, then they had like an on or off switch for whether the store was on, whether it was off, or whether it was on during these hours that they set. So like a real business. Yeah, I know, it's kind of complicated. The cool thing about that...
You're aware the internet doesn't turn off at night, right?
So yeah, the cool thing about that is basically what it meant was they had 2 separate user flows, and then this little logic thing would say, okay, do I display at this page? Which flow am I in? What do I display? Which is really easy to do in Meteor, and it was really fun to work on. That's something I was pretty proud of, like getting that to work, because it was like a weird requirement, weird technical challenge. Had to be you had to perpetuate the data for like it was pretty complicated, and that was really fun to work on. So yeah, so that was Amari, and then got my fingers burnt, and I started freelancing again, but this time doing programming, and I realized like what I really wanted to spend my time doing was like actually writing code, not like managing clients and like managing myself and managing projects and then doing like billing people and then filing the taxes for that, and like all this other stuff that comes with freelancing is really a big headache. I just wanted to write code, so I applied for a few jobs. I wanted to stay for at least 1 more year in San Luis Obispo. It's close to my parents, and they were going to be moving, so I was going to be managing their house. Personal stuff aside, I wanted to stay in San Luis Obispo, and really the only serious player in technology in the area is MindBody. And they were going through an IPO right as I was applying. So I applied, and it was this really crazy kind of application process where like everything was like in flux in the company. They didn't know what they could share with me, what they couldn't, because no one really knew like what the IPO meant for them. Yeah, like my recruiter like mixed up the hours, so I did really well on the homework, and then like during the interview he was like, "Where are you?" And I was like, "I'll be there in an hour." He's like, "No, it starts now." So I like rushed over there. It's 20 minutes away from where I'm living right now, or 15 minutes away from where I'm living. And like I came in, and like the entire team that was interviewing me was sitting in a row behind a chair at a desk. And I was told explicitly it would be a non-technical interview because I already did the technical interview on the phone, and then I did homework, and then it was just a keyboard and a screen and 4 people sitting behind me in a 90-degree room that had been waiting for 10 minutes, and I was like, oh geez, I am not prepared for this at all. I hadn't practiced that morning. I thought I was like just gonna have this cushy like talk to people, feel good interview that was like for cultural fit. And it was not a super difficult technical interview, but it was just the stress of the situation. I just totally bombed it, and I flubbed. Like at the end, I had like a really easy question, and my brain just like blanked on like how to do this certain pattern in JavaScript, which is it's a basic pattern. I think you guys will learn it. I think you're still learning it. It's like a module pattern in JavaScript, or like hacked object-oriented JavaScript. And it was like, okay, do this and that, and I was like, how do I make an object? I don't know. So that was how I ended up at MindBody, and now I am here before you, and that's my whole life story, starting from the start of my career. That's the abbreviated version, abridged. That's the word I was looking for.
Okay, so how did you actually locate MindBody, and how did you approach the job search process in such a specific regional area? Yeah.
So I was not just applying at MindBody. I applied for a few jobs. I was torn between working up north because that's where the tech industry is like Northern California, and My girlfriend is in San Diego, so I was torn between like applying in San Diego, just working here for a year, or like going back to San Francisco, which is where I had been in and out of for a while before that. And I applied for a couple of jobs, and actually I got an offer, and the on paper it was like a better position as far as like salary goes, up north. But I decided it was really important to have a good cultural fit, and MindBody is really good about like benefits. So like there's an on-site like CrossFit gym that does like yoga classes every day, stuff like that. It's got like that kind of vibe. People are healthy, and I know like going into programming it's really unhealthy. So MindBody itself is an exception. I drove by the building and I was like, that looks like a tech company, and I looked them up online. That was actually how I found out about MindBody. So I did look at other companies. I have friends at other companies here, at tech companies. I didn't apply for any of those. I've been approached now by them. They kind of compete with each other for talent, so it's kind of an interesting situation. Another one is Rosetta. But again, I didn't apply for those. I applied for several up north, several in San Diego, and then MindBody. I got a weird offer in working on like for a contractor for an Angular application that was contracting to AT&T. The entire business was one contract, and I was like, that sounds like it paid really well, and it was Angular, but I was like, that sounds kind of not my cup of tea. And then another one was another cool opportunity, but the timing was off for San Francisco. So yeah, finding a job locally. What I ended up doing was I found out about the job. I asked somebody who worked there like what it was like to see if I would like it, and then to see if they could like introduce me to somebody who worked there so I could figure out in engineering what their department was like the product development department. So I highly recommend the whole personal approach, because at the end of the day, you're going to be working with these people. If you approach them on a personal level, you're not just a number, you're not just a piece of paper. They're going to take more into account. It's more honest feedback. Like you can be more honest when you're talking to them in person versus like, here's my marketing page, my resume. Here's like me marketing myself through my digital portfolio. So yeah, so I contacted somebody. Then after like kind of getting a warm lead, so to speak, then I actually applied through their like they have like an application process through I think like Lever or one of those like JobVite. I forget which one, but the one where you go and fill out the form and stuff. And then pretty soon they had actually a really rigorous hiring process. Out of anybody, theirs was like the most intense, which actually in a weird way was kind of like a positive feedback signal. I was like, oh yeah, okay, cool. They're like really vetting me, and everyone else is like just like, oh yeah, okay, you look like you can program, sure, come on board. I was like, you know, I don't know. You didn't ask me any questions. How do you know I can program?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, which is I know it's a weird perspective to take, but it was kind of positive feedback. There was some really gnarly miscommunication between the recruiter and I, but at the end of the day, it all came out in the wash. So yeah, personal approach. Drove by the building, found somebody who worked there, contacted them, got a warm lead.
How did fill in the gap? How did you find somebody who worked there?
Well, San Luis Obispo is a small town, but I actually just Googled like on Facebook MindBody and then saw if there was anybody near me who worked at MindBody. I got lucky and I knew somebody who knew that person, so it was like we had common friends, and I like just did the oh hey, intro me to this person. But for the one in San Diego, I just talked to a guy. Like it was like I knew a guy who knew a guy, you know. I found an opportunity like Angular developer. I talked to this guy who worked with the person who had the contract with AT&T, and that was a warm intro. I didn't even see their like online thing actually. And yeah, no, they showed me the online thing after the fact, after talking to them. So the warm leads thing has been way better than cold like emailing. Although one success cold emailing was a Rails application developer in the marketing department in Apple, and I got a call back from them, but it was after I had already started working, and I was like, oh, I'm so curious, like if I could like pass that rigor. Like it's like in the marketing department building applications for marketing, but still like that would be a pretty cool like self-assessment kind of thing.
Nice. See, that's something that we've talked a fair bit about and are certainly going to be speaking more about is how do you actually start from like your little bubble and figure out how to connect the dots to like finding people.
Yeah, certainly. It's a lot of just like, being okay with just randomly talking to people, I think is really what it comes down to. And recognizing, here's something I wish I would have known. I sort of treated my interviews as like, I had, when I first started, like really, really bad imposter syndrome, like, oh, I don't actually know what I'm doing, and I don't want anyone to find out I don't know what I'm doing. I can tell you guys specifically, coming out of this program, coming out of Viking specifically, looking at how the curriculum has grown even since I did it, you will be better prepared than you think you are. It's really solid, and I think one of the really big strengths of it, not that I mean, obviously you don't need to sell this to you guys, but it's sort of like reassurance to you that like you're gonna have this doubt in your mind, and like you just have to project confidence because you can do the job. Unless it's like something really, really specialized, like artificial intelligence, like programmer in like some weird dialect of Lisp, I would say probably do some homework before you apply for that job. But like for most web application developer type jobs, full stack, front end, back end, web developer, you will be well prepared. You'll have to work hard. You still have to continually learn, but you're better prepared than you might think. And that confidence will certainly show in like an interview. So two things that you guys might not think to ask that I wanted to share with you is that now I've actually interviewed people for front-end engineer position. So I've gotten to see at least what it's like to look at somebody like who's really nervous and sweaty and like distinguishing between noise and signal. Which is, I think, the biggest challenge that interviewers face, and nobody's good at it. So there's three things at play. Is the recruiter probably doesn't know what you're actually going to be doing. Most of the time, like, and these are, so there's other things that are mind-body specific. These are things I've confirmed with my friends in tech. The recruiters don't necessarily know what you actually will do day to day. Their job is just to get you hired. Like they get paid on commission a lot of the times, and so they want to get you hired. The recruiter's your friend, but they don't know what you're going to be doing, and they might not have an accurate representation of the team you're going to be working on, things like that. The people you want to talk to are the actual engineers, the team that are going to be hiring you so that you can fulfill the need that they feel because they got some budget so that they can like now get an extra person to actually complete this job. If you can quickly talk to that team, it'll cut down a lot of pain for both parties because you'll pretty quickly find out, do I want to work with these people? Do they want to work with me? Can I do the job that they're saying that they can do? So getting past the recruiter is just making your resume look as good as you possibly can within reason. Like, don't say you've done things you haven't done, but don't be afraid to market yourself. I think that's something I really didn't do because I was trying to I wanted that like litmus test. I wanted to prove that I could like get a hardcore engineering job at a big tech company with just like representing myself exactly honestly. And it's something I wish I would have spent a little bit more time like being more of like a self-promoter with like my resume because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is can you complete the job and can you work with the people that you're working with. Everything else is to figure out if you can do that. So that's one thing I wanted to say, which is that recruiters don't know what they're looking for necessarily. Number two is it's a field of specialties. It's a field of infinitely deep specialties. That's what I've learned being in an industry. So what you're learning is like this stack of technology to solve business problems. And like at my company, there are people who don't understand. Like you would think that the like site reliability engineers would know like what the software engineers are doing, but they don't actually know. There's not a lot of interchange, and a lot of the people that are out of college a few years, they've already forgotten the stuff that you're like really worried about now with like algorithms and like the whole like they're not fresh on solving a bunch of programming challenges because they're like really deep in their specialty. So like again, at the end of the day, it's about actually From my two sources, anecdotal sources, but it's one, my experience, and two, asking people who are in technology if this is true or if it's just mind body. It's like this field of deep specialties, and what you're trying to do is be able to do the job that you're trying to get hired for. And if you can do the job, which I believe that you're well equipped to do at the end of Viking Code School for web application development, then your goal is to represent that as well as you can for actually transitioning into like a legit job.
That's awesome stuff. So you mentioned that you want to try and talk to the team as quickly as possible. I mean, is that just something you have to wait until you get your way past the recruiter or the HR person to get to, or is there a way to hack into it?
I talked to an HR person, then a recruiter, and I asked both of them if I could contact the person I would be working with, and they said yes, and they gave me the email before I was supposed to get it. So as long as you can get on that call, and like the obvious stuff is like be humble about it and just ask. And they, like Evan, the recruiter, I'm working with him now, making like the job descriptions better. But he doesn't. He specifically, our recruiter, is really pressed for time, and so he's got to thin slice people like really fast. And so like he doesn't have time to think a lot and to really understand like job descriptions going out and then input from resumes going in. So we're like tooling with that process. So you're talking to somebody who's not necessarily going to think, oh, this person would like to talk to the engineering team they're going to be working on. But if you ask that, they're probably willing, as long as you've made it to talking on the phone with them. They're calling you. They're interested. Say, can I talk to the engineering team so I can ask them questions to see if this might be a good fit for both of us? Something like that. That's all I did. I got the email of the front-end engineer manager, and I had a conversation with her via email before the technical interview.
That's great advice. Cool. Well, so I have a number of questions, but I want to make sure that everyone else here has a chance to ask all of your questions. So if you're in the Hangout, obviously you could freely ask questions any time that you want. If you're watching from the outside, there's this little Q&A app, which I believe is officially active, where you can ask questions. It's this little blue Q&A icon, so feel free to ask questions there. Otherwise, you can ask questions in Slack. If you're on Slack, you can ask questions in the Google event if you're at the Google event. So we'll kind of pull questions from everywhere. Definitely would prefer if you ask either live in the Hangout or on the Q&A app, but feel free to fire away now, because this is a good time.
So I can right away ask a quick question. You were spot on that the recruiters have no idea what you'd be doing. Already running into that. So basically, my biggest question, you talked a lot about how your current job was a good fit because of the culture and all of, just the atmosphere there. How important is it to find a good culture fit for your first job? Is it, I guess, are you looking for something where you're comfortable, or is it more important just to get yourself out of your comfort zone and expand it? But just to make yourself a well-rounded developer from the start?
It's a really good question. I mean, the obvious cop-out answer is it totally depends on what you want. So the value in that answer is like you need to define what you want, right? I have a friend who said I was crazy for taking this job because it's below market salary. And he said, I will get you a job. He's kind of, anyway, he's like, I'll get you a job getting paid twice as much. And I was like, yeah, working 80 hours a week, like to the bone and weekends and not sleeping. I've done that, no thanks. So for me, the choice was really difficult, but it was taking less salary as a tax for a company that like doesn't call you after 5 p.m., doesn't expect you to work on weekends, and provides a lot of health benefits. As far as the opportunity to become a well-rounded developer, so you kind of had two questions in there. For me, that one was surprising, where basically I've had the opportunity to do as much work. If I wanted to work 80 hours a week, I could. So for me, I found sort of a sweet spot for my personal tastes and preferences. It's gotten me into trouble because every time I've been overworked, it's been because I've been pushing myself out of my comfort zone, and I've asked for it. And I'd have to remind myself, I asked to be on this more difficult project so I could learn something. Like, I didn't have to learn TypeScript. I was never expected to work on the TypeScript side of things. I could have just gone chugging along doing JavaScript. But I got to a point where I started getting bored with JavaScript because it was just the same thing over and over. And so I said, can I work on this other project, this more modular, cooler, hotter thing? And they said yes. Here's the whole project, and I was like, oh, okay. So that coupled with, I think a general response is like, if you like the culture from like a personal level, that's probably important, depending on how important it is to you. The second thing after that is like, if you can bear the culture. The second thing after that is making sure there's technical talent that can help you grow, that you can be mentored by. And I've been really lucky to like have some really amazing people where like they've been working in this, like some guys were like like older programmers who are senior leads who have been like working in the industry for years. They've seen it all and they've kept up to breadth, so they actually like are on the bleeding edge even after that. I don't know how they're not burnt out. But those are like the people who I can go and like if they have time, I like tap them on the shoulder. I'm like, hey, I've got a question, and then they blow my mind with their knowledge. So I think like getting a mentor if you want to grow as a developer is really important, and that's been something that's been invaluable that I was missing as a like hacker freelance guy.
So safe to say, just to summarize, like if you were to prioritize, what's the most important thing is probably just finding a team that could mentor you, and everything else is just your, I guess, personal preference or whatever's important to you values-wise. But just as a developer, finding a team, I guess, that could shepherd you along to where you want to be.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, and even that comes with some preferences. Like I don't like my hand held a lot, but I like to have like the idea that there's somebody, if I really screw things up, which I've done, that I can go and wave my laptop at and say, help me. An example of my biggest mess up so far to date, and I've worked here now for like 9 months-ish. My biggest mess up was so I have to work in a virtual machine, and I really don't like it. I don't like working because I have to switch between like the Mac side and then the virtual machine to do check-ins using Visual Studio because it's a Microsoft stack, very proprietary. So I was building tools to help me be able to only use the Mac side of things, so that I wouldn't have to go in Visual Studio to check in my code. And I initialized a Git repository in something that uses what's called Team Foundation Server. So like gitignore, they have .tf signore. All of these things, instead of git this or git that, it's tf this or tf that. And I don't like it. I like Git. I'm a huge super fan of Git. So I initialized this Git repository. So I had this hacked thing. I read this blog on how to set that up, and then I had to actually check something in using like TFS. And because of that collision of how I initialized a Git repository inside of something that was already like basically using TFS's whole thing, which is different than Git. Git cleaned the repository, meaning it deleted all of the files that I had just changed. I didn't even know I did it. And so then when I went to check in the code, which is like a push, there was nothing there. All of my changes were gone. So I had to like run to this senior developer and be like, what did I do? And he like was like, you're an idiot. Look in your trash folder. And they were there. But I didn't even think to do that. It was like something simple. So yeah. So I have a tendency to ramble. But to answer your question, I like from my personal thing is like, you know, resources in the form of mentorship and a cultural fit are like my two most important things. And I think the most important thing for you is like introspectively look at what you value in your life and then try to get that as best fit as you can in a job. So I know it's ambiguous, but and then developer growth is like, yeah, you have a mentor. So I hope that was a good answer.
That was awesome. Much appreciated.
Okay.
Thank you. So anyone else have a question? Again, feel free if you're on the outside of the Hangout here to use the Q&A app. If you can fire it up, it sounds like maybe it's not working for everyone, but feel free to fire over questions any way that I can see them, I can pass them on.
Did you really?
Sorry, go ahead, kid.
Sorry, Andrew. Mine's really fast though. Did you really say you work 40 hours a week? Is that possible?
Yeah, it's crazy. Erik can attest to this. I've historically taken on more than I can handle as far as hours go. And so like starting the job, I was in like panic mode, like panic mode in like supercharged Silicon Valley type, like caffeinated, like gotta get things done as soon as they come to my table. And there wasn't anything for me to do like the first week I worked there, because they hadn't like set up my environment and all that stuff. So it took a week to set up my environment. They're like really slow paced, and they're like, yeah, you don't like. And then like the Friday, I was like my the guy who was training me was like, yeah, you can take off early. Like we'll get you started on this project we need help on like next week. And it was like I didn't know. You know that in Talladega Nights where he's like holding his hands. I don't know what to do with my hands. Like that was how I felt. Like I was like okay. So I just walked in. Yeah, I actually worked 40 hours.
That's crazy.
So
Andrew?
Yep. So I guess my question is kind of a follow-up to the previous culture questions. How do you exactly figure that out? How do you go to a company and through the interview process figure out what their culture is? Do you get enough exposure through the interview process, or is that something that you just have to, just know or try to discern from mixed signals and stuff?
That is such a good question. Yeah, that so short answer, no. I don't think you can really tell from the interview process. For the same reason they can't tell if you're actually really good or if you're just really good at looking good. You can tell, I think, like, the whole, it's kind of like the truism is like, people are the same wherever you go, so your intuition for people is going to be right wherever you go. So if you feel like you could be friends with these people, or if you feel like they've got like something you like, something is attractive, I think that's a good indicator. Certainly, there are things I don't like about my company. I think that's true for anybody at any company. Legacy code, dear Lord. That's something I hope, I do not wish on my worst enemy, is some of the legacy code that I've had to deal with. That was not something that I had ever dealt with before, because it was always new code I was writing, and that is a talent I am regret to have now, is fixing legacy code. Yeah, that's not culture though. Certain things in the culture is like this company, with going from private to IPO, it's had a ton of changes. So the culture's already changed since I've been there. I don't think I would have been able to tell overall the cultural vibe of the zeitgeist of the company, if you will, just from the interview. I think, I tried really hard to make that clear that was my intent in the interview, and I think that kind of gets you brownie points that you care enough about that to ask. Weird stuff being on the interviewer side is people don't ask about that most of the time. I've interviewed several people now who are like, a lot of them wouldn't ask, do you have any questions? We ask them. We leave 20 minutes at the end of an hour-long interview. Do you have any questions? And like, a lot of it starts with awkward silence, or their questions are very topical. So if you think ahead of time of that, like cultural questions, and make it more of a conversation between people rather than an interchange of like entity and potential employee, I think, one, it makes the interview a lot more pleasant for both parties. Two, in a weird way, it kind of earns you points because you care, right? You're like projecting that you care. But the more important thing, I think you really should do it, is then you'll actually find out that information that you're asking is like, is this a cultural fit? Like every question that was a cultural question they asked me, I reflected back to them, and I would say, like, what do you guys think? Like the cultural question is like, what if you had to pick out a pizza for this whole team, what would you order? And I laughed, and I was like, I would ask you guys what you want. Why would I pick out a pizza and like just force my pizza upon you? And they were like, they laughed, and then I was like, what would you get? What pizza would you make me eat? Is what I asked them, and they thought it was funny. So like it leads to that like more casual interchange, and I think that's really good indicator. Like if I had said that and they didn't laugh, I probably wouldn't have wanted to work there. If they didn't have like if they weren't down with like my weirdness, then I would have been like, oh, okay, you guys are really serious, and I'm probably gonna get fired if I work here. If they were that.
Nice.
It's a great answer. Thanks a lot.
Cool.
Other questions? Other questions? All right, so
I have another one. Just a quick one. How hard was it to transition from Viking to? I know that you worked in your startup, but just in the context of Bootcamp, like how well was your transition into the real world coding?
Yeah. So difficult for reasons I wouldn't have predicted. I thought it was going to be like, oh, I'm going to have all these technical challenges. I thought like, oh, I'm going to have to like flatten an array of like unidentified numbers and letters and symbols, or like, I'm going to have to like I'm going to have to design some algorithm that runs in like linear time, or something like that. The technical challenge is like the most complicated, like the only time I had to think about, like, for instance, like algorithmic complexity was this really weird requirement of like basically I had nested arrays, basically just a 2D array, make sure that it just doesn't crash the CPU when you've got like 10,000 items that we're sending down. Optimize it that way. That's the most complicated thing. The complications came from like the environment, the massive code base, massive. I've seen probably 10% of all of the code that exists in the company. There's one JavaScript function, as far as bad legacy code, that was over 3,000 lines. I was going to say 5,000, but I think it got cut down. One function, 3,000 lines of code. So like, imagine you have to go fix that. That's the environment that you're in. You've got new tools. You've got this new like process. So they use agile, but it's their own flavor. And I talked to another friend. I was like, what is your agile process? It's completely different. People say agile, and really like the only thing that stays the same is velocity points and Scrum, and maybe tasks on some version of a board. But I've seen 3 different flavors just talking to people. So the hardest part was getting up to speed with like how everyone interacts, the lingo that they use to describe things, the software itself, the massive code base, fixing bugs in code someone wrote 4 years ago that is no longer there. I can't even ask them about. Fixing code that like is like from the start of the company, which is like why it doesn't even need to exist there anymore. Like that was the biggest challenge, was getting my head in the environment and like getting up to speed with like all of the tools that were unfamiliar with to me. That was the surprisingly most difficult challenge. And then as far as like if you're willing to like take the time to really like learn what you're doing, like what you're specifically like asked to do, I think, at least for me, that was a relatively smooth process. Especially, like I said, going from like 80-hour weeks plus to like 40-hour week, it was like when I first started, I had a lot of time to like just think about like getting up to speed and like learning, for instance, like Knockout, which is an older JavaScript library that kind of lost out, but we're still using. And I can't talk about it, but we're using it in a really cool way. So. the TypeScript side of things. Very cool. So that kind of had to like earn working on that, was like by learning like the basics of Knockout and stuff. So, but the hardest part was the environment.
Cool. Thanks.
cool. So I have a question kind of based on something that you said way back at the beginning.
Cool.
When you were talking about working in the crazier environment, working in the wild startup, and you'd mentioned that there was a big difference between developing and engineering, and in the way that you were sort of doing the caffeine-fueled development versus actually learning about engineering. Can you talk about what some of those contrasts are and how you learned up on so-called the engineering side of things?
Certainly. Okay, so I'll say one thing. QA, quality assurance or analysis. I only ever call them QA. Quality assurance. They have made me like at least twice a better developer, an engineer, thinking through edge cases, because it is their trained job profession. What they do for 8 hours a day is breaking your code. So I don't know if you guys have gotten to do that yet. It's like breaking other people's code. But like doing it yourself, you just think of the use cases that you came up with. You think, oh, okay, well, I planned for this use case, so let me make sure that that use case that I wrote directly for doesn't fail. But I have to think about I think we support the double digits of languages. We have a huge number of users that are clients. So we're a B2B business, right? I never said what MindBody does. That would probably give you some good context. MindBody is a wellness software, which means like gyms, yoga studios, and anything in between, martial arts studios, salons, anything you could think of that's like wellness, making yourself feel better. We serve their business needs. So if you've ever seen MindBody's consumer applications, the mobile version just got good. The web version, I feel sorry if you've ever had to use that. The consumer web experience from MindBody is very old, brittle, and it's unfortunate if you use it. So that being said, we have to think about the businesses, then the businesses' clients. And so we have like millions of users and a whole bunch of different languages, and they will come up with like using the software in ways that you would never think that someone would try to use it in. And QA's job is to replicate that. So that whole like working as a hacker developer in a freelance, here's somebody, they've got like whatever, like 20 people they're serving. I build exactly what they want. They serve those like 20 people a day or whatever, and they pay me because they're making enough money to make that work. Those numbers are all fake and wrong, right? But the point is that it's like not massive scale. It's not just like running a statistics experiment on your software like with a bunch of people randomly pressing keys. We actually have like we had a problem. A server got fried because the cat on a keyboard test, which is just holding down enter, because we didn't have debouncing. So we weren't stopping the submit of a form, and it would just submit infinitely as many times as the keyboard would trigger the event. So stuff like that makes you a better engineer because you have to think through edge cases. You've got to design things instead of just being like, what do you want? Let me build it really super agile, like one piece at a time. It's more like, okay, we've got these big needs. They're known. We know what data we're processing. We're building a feature for these people. How can I make this work on release instead of like the most basic version? Well, it's still like the most basic version, but like something that's broken, the client just is not going to find out about it because they don't have millions of people using it. So that's the big transition. Is like it's really thinking through requirements at a deeper scale than just jumping right into coding it up.
I think that applies on a high level in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
in the learning process. Well, cool. Are there any other questions out there as we begin to draw to our close?
I have another small one, since my first one was really just an expression of incredulity and not really a question, so let me attempt that. Do you pair at all in practice where you are? I know that's kind of a cultural thing, but have you ever seen that in the wild? And is there a culture of that at your company?
Pair programming?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love pair programming. Yeah. We don't do it as much as some people. Like I think some shops like just all pair programming. I think that get old. But we certainly pair program. Especially like, you know, it's more someone's got some area of expertise. You are working on a project that needs their help. It's just easier to get in the same room in front of a keyboard and pass it back and forth. Yeah, I love it. It's you know, like watching other people. I'm sure you've heard all of the benefits, and I'm sure you guys have done it. I think if you're still doing the whole like driver navigator thing. We don't have formal pair programming. It's just like, hey, let's hop in a room and like for the next hour or two, let's write this together. Love it. It's great. Yeah.
Cool. I'm glad it's still done. Yeah, that's all we do. So it's
yeah.
it's a good tool.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm getting nostalgic thinking about some of the bugs that we ran into pair programming in Viking. So those were fun.
Those are dark days.
Oh yeah, man. There was one where we spent. I'll just out myself about this. I got so much crap for this. we were using like I don't know what part you're at, but we were doing the Dane book, and we were using like code I had written individually and code other people had written individually and smashing it together.
I don't know if we could call what you'd written code.
Huh?
I said I don't know if we could call what you'd written quite code.
Yeah, so so I had forgotten an opening div, and there was a closing div, and we were trying to write integration tests, and they weren't running, and we were on the last one, and we spent 4 hours debugging, and it was 3 people pair programming, and one of the people was like, "Wait a second, does this div have an opening tag? Does this div have an opening tag? Is that what's causing the problem?" Because we spent 4 hours on the last integration test, and I had written a div. I had deleted it, then forgot to take out the ending tag. So the integration test was letting us know, just not in the right way. And they were pretty mad about that. Deleted it, and all of our tests passed. So that was the most embarrassing, like, it's not very good code.
But it's better now.
Oh yeah. I don't think I was a very good Viking student, but I'm a lot more confident now in my engineering capabilities. So yeah.
Well, so we have one last question from outside here that I've been sent along, and it's due TDD. So what role is testing playing in your workflow?
Oh man, this has been a long discussion because I've been advocating for bringing tests into the raw knockout side. It's on the TypeScript side because it better lends itself to that. But there's a lot of ideas about how to write JavaScript that are bad, wrong, or like just different. So it's hard to write across the board unit tests. On the TypeScript side, we don't do TDD, but we're writing unit tests. Some people are advocating for TDD, they like it, but most of the devs on the TypeScript side are kind of like, we don't really want to do that. We'll just write our unit tests post-processing. So, yeah. Also, I have a quote that really inspired me when I was in Viking. I wanted to share with you guys. I don't know if Stacy Toussaint came by, but she came and did a talk to us and showed us how cool like programming was when we were first getting started, and like blew our minds. And one of the things she like left on, which I always thought was really funny, it's like really good life advice. I think of it often, is if you're doing something that is making you sad, stop doing it. And it's so simply put, but you end up in a lot of like situations where you're like, okay, like on a deeper level, if you're pushing on a problem. And like I'll think of that sometimes. I'm like really caught up in my own solution, and I'm starting to freak out about it because I need something done. Just stopping, stepping back, and like taking a breather, and then like not thinking about a solution for a second, then coming back to it with fresh eyes, has been one of the most useful tools in my arsenal. So I wanted to like just kind of end on that. Is like if you're doing something that's making you sad, stop doing it. Stacy Toussaint.
I don't think I could do any better than that. So, well, thank you so much, Peter, for chatting with everyone tonight. Thank you, everyone who's watching either now or later. And this has been the Viking Codecast with Peter DePaulo of MindBody Online, former student and JavaScripter extraordinaire. So thank you all very much. I hope you have a great day, evening, morning, or night, and we will see you guys next week.
Thanks for your questions.
Have a good one.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thanks a lot, Peter.